about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. Get this dance. You about to lose your job because you are detaining me for nothing. You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. Get this dance. You about to lose your job. Oh my goodness. You about to lose your job. Get this dance. You about to lose your job.
All right.
You about to lose your job because you are detaining me for nothing.
Here we are, you guys, all of us.
I don't see
guys.
Dan. I'm so sorry.
You don't see Dan. Oh,
I
no.
don't see Dan.
Dan, can you see Amanda?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Let's try and figure this out.
Alf, you about to lose your job.
So let's do this. Remove. And maybe this. Can you guys see each other yet?
Mm-mm.
Oh, for crying out loud. All right, who wants to take one for the crowd and jump off and jump back on?
I'll jump out.
Okay, all right, we'll see you in a second.
Oh, wait,
right.
no, I can't.
I can't
Oh,
hear her
wait.
either because you're talking to
I
her.
can't. My phone is super, super broken.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't connect with me, I can't connect out.
Okay, so Dan, can you jump off and jump back on? Can you see me?
Sure.
You can see me.
I can see you. Yeah.
You can't see Amanda, which is ridiculous. Okay, jump off, jump back on. Okay.
I'm sorry.
All good. How's it going, Amanda Brass? In the flesh. Look at you. We all get to see this amazing woman that has been this disembodied voice the entire time. It's very exciting to see you, Brassy.
Thanks. That's very kind of you. And I still am a disembodied voice. I am a semi-opaque ghost rolling around the hills of East Los Angeles, like, what's happening? Yeah.
All right, here we go. Hopefully Dan will be able to.
Yay! Dan, let's see your haircut. Damn! Would you like
Dan,
to
can you see
borrow some
Amanda?
of my hair? Wow, Dan.
Hey, how you doing?
Dropped.
Yeah, I
For
got
the
short.
summer.
Well,
It's the Chicago summer, right?
well, yeah, and here's the thing. I only did it. This is not going to be the new look. I only did it just in case things go south again and they close all the barber shops.
Oh.
Like, yeah.
Okay.
This is not the new look. This is just this is a functional look for
Got
right
it.
now.
Got it.
Look,
Okay.
I hear that. I hear that.
All right.
It feels amazing though.
Well,
It's
probably
fantastic.
like running around with no underwear. You're just feeling air everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here we are, you guys. Like we're in like amazingly enough, last week when we had this conversation, when we met up, we decided to throw everything out the window and do a conversation on U.S. law enforcement. And I don't know about you guys, but also I wasn't entirely sure that we would still be talking about this week. Because I just wasn't sure that this would continue. There were a lot of things that have happened in this week. And this is also our 10th freaking episode. How crazy is that? We've been doing this for 10 weeks. Brassy, we did one without you, and to this day I regret it. But 10 episodes. Oh my gosh.
Nice.
Two micheladas. Get this. I'm drinking tequila and jarritos.
Jarritos.
Yeah.
Con piña? Con
No.
Mango,
Mango.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So we're obviously on a wavelength.
Yeah, we are definitely on a wavelength. That's so funny.
I brought the tagine to spice my beverage.
Oh, nice.
I have 3 different types of hot sauce ready for in case.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you came to win.
I brought a limon.
Nice.
I have it. I'm ready.
I'm actually growing a lemon tree in my kitchen, a lime lemon tree.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I feel the limon. So you guys, 10 episodes in, and I wanted to do something that was kind of like a retrospective, like, oh my gosh, we've come so far. And that's 10 weeks worth of like doing this and keeping something up. The only thing I'm this committed to is probably my relationship, my marriage.
I like how the probably showed up in that. Probably my man.
So
Oh, okay.
also my job, my career,
Yeah.
I think is very important. But yeah, I mean, like we've been doing this, we've committed, we've done this. We've almost accrued a whole dollar in in the monetization of these views, and I'm just so excited and so proud that we've been able to keep this up. But I wanted let's try to bring down the celebratory aspect of all of it.
Yeah.
Dan, you were late today. What's up? What happened?
Oh, well, I was running errands, and then Sarah was having to use the computer, which I can't use right now anyway. I'm on the app on my iPad anyway, so who cares? But I will say I got a little delayed at the Walgreens because there was a lady running up and down the aisles going, "I got the disease! I got the disease! I got the disease!"
And it's
So
not
things were a
Pac-Man
little
fever?
interesting.
Oh,
What's
no.
that?
It's not
Yeah.
Pac-Man fever.
That's really good.
She needed to be home, so.
Yeah, it was an interesting few moments, and it sort of delayed me a little bit. Sorry, guys.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah. So I mean, both looting and riots in all three of the cities that we all live in. Protests still going every single day for the last almost 2 weeks now. And so, you know, I was derping around trying to figure out, like, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to talk about? Should we bring in a guest? I do want to have guests eventually, and I have some that I'm focusing in on. And maybe in the next couple of weeks we'll figure that out. But I did see something that really kind of like jolted me this week, and it was somebody writing about how this is all part of a leftist vaccinator cultish campaign to create civil war, to get people freaked out during the pandemic, create civil war and take over, right? And I thought about that, and it was both like, you know, like mind-bogglingly stupid, because we all know that we can barely keep things together as it is. We definitely aren't, like, as a society, we don't have our shit sufficiently together to pull off a massive multi-level like plot and conspiracy. So I was just thinking about how stupid that was, but also I thought, like, what a complete lack of context these people had. That they saw this moment, and we've heard it a million times. These are unprecedented times, an unprecedented pandemic, an unprecedented amount of protests. But really, that's kind of dumb to me, because there have been pandemics in the past. There have been social movements in the past. We can do direct tracing of how things happen and where all of this stems from, without having to concoct these incredible ideas of international conspiracies against the U.S. that involve vaccines and BLM being like an Antifa stooge, and all of these kind of wild conspiracies that are egged on by people in power who actually do have something to gain by promoting these conspiracies. And so I wanted to kind of like talk about the idea of these moments, this riot. We're at war. This is unprecedented. Let me tell you something. If anybody tells you that we're at war, it's because they're projecting a desire to be at war.
Mm-hmm.
Papa!
Right.
Papa!
I mean, I do not hear anybody who's protesting in the streets saying we're at war. Nobody who's actually on the streets is saying we're at war. I don't hear the military or the police say we're at war. No. All I see, the only people who say we're at war are dumb people who are projecting their desire to usually use their own guns, or their desire to have some sort of conflict or some sort of finality to thing that's like, why are all these people speaking out? This is all making me super uncomfortable. And I think it's stupid and dangerous. And we all owe it as people who love history, as people who are as Americans, to kind of put an end to these conversations around, we're at war, this is unprecedented, where is this coming from? It's all part of a conspiracy. And I wanted to start that with the great American tradition of rioting. Woo!
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So the U.S. has destroyed property and confronted authority since its inception. And this goes all the way back, obviously, to the Boston Tea Party, but there's literally hundreds of examples of...
Yes.
Right? So what flag is this, Dan?
You know what? Gonna have to take a hard pass. You're gonna have to explain it to me. What am I looking at?
Whiskey Rebellion.
Oh!
How about
No
that?
way! I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
It's quite good looking.
It's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Like I bought it and I was just like, oh, this is fun. And then I've been loath to fly it for a while because I think I saw it in some sort of like right-wing kooks blog at some point. I was just like, well, great. I can never, or some sort of libertarian blog or something. And I was just like, well, now I can never use it again.
Right.
But
and that's the problem with we can get into the flag thing some other show, but that's the problem with flag. There's so many amazing flags that always, as soon as you're super excited about them, some nut job co-ops them.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of cool flags, right? Like I think the for all of the shortcomings of Texas and the Texas Republic, the come and take it cannon flag, talk about being co-opted by lunatics or having like a lunatic like origin, but a cannon with the words written come and take it underneath it is undeniably badass.
Yes. Yeah.
So anyway, so that's the Whiskey Rebellion. And that's a lesser known like moment, but an important moment in the development of the country, where angry white people were upset about a tiny tax on whiskey, right? Like it's the equivalent of, I can't go to Baskin Robbins, I can't get my hair cut, oh, you're putting a tax on my whiskey, riot. But I did want to talk about go ahead, Dan.
Interesting fact about the Whiskey Rebellion that I learned when I worked in our nation's capital. The one time that the president has actually taken the field with the military. There's arguments for Madison during the War of 1812, but he wasn't commanding, he was observing. Washington actually commanded the army and went up there to Pennsylvania and did it. Although I'm sure we will hear that what's-his-face will say that he took the field with the army. I promise you as soon as he finds out that fact, he's going to say he did it.
Yeah, well, let's keep it on the DL then, and not let's make sure our viewership remains as low as it is, so that nobody finds out what you just said.
But it's a fun fact of American history. The one time. The
Whiskey Rebellion. Interesting.
Yep.
So we've got the Whiskey Rebellion, and we've got all of these kind of smallish rebellions that are part of the history. Sometimes states would go at each other and have like little wars over pieces of territory, which is kind of weird. Like I want to say that like Ohio and Michigan had some sort of spat. But by and large, I think the biggest rebellion outside of the Civil War, of course, that we can kind of like start pinpointing as like, this is people like usurping what is a real like what is an established order. I think the draft riots is kind of like an important moment, and of course the draft riots are awesome because the gangs of New York sort of peaks during the draft riots. Dan, you want to give us kind of a rundown of what the draft riots were?
So I actually want to say something about the draft riots. They're a very complicated thing, and you said that the draft riots are awesome, and they are awesome in one sense. They're really awesome. In another sense, they're absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
So they're very complicated thing. Like there was this awesome sort of class thing going on where it, you know, it still happens today, but there was this awesome sort of class thing where poor Irish immigrants mostly were like, this is dumb and unfair that some rich guy uptown can pay $300 and not have to go to war, but I get no choice. I get drafted in. I have to go. If I don't go, I go to jail.
Yeah.
Right?
So just to clarify, the draft riots were an uprising around the fact that people were being conscripted. They were being into the Union Army in New York, but you could pay $300 and get out of service.
Right. Well, the guys that I will say, the people that used to travel around the country and say, sure, I'll be your substitute and collect the bounty and then skip town and then go to another town and tell another rich guy and then tell another. That's pretty clever.
That is pretty smart.
But then there was a real ugly racial component that came into the draft riots.
That's right.
That has to be recognized, obviously. But it's a very complicated thing. It's awesome and it's terrible all at the same time.
Well, it was basically pitting, the Irish versus black folks, and the concept that the poorest white person can always feel higher than the highest black person, and that I think that played immensely into the draft riots. And I said they were awesome. I meant like visually awesome, as you guys could see in this image.
Yeah, and honestly, Gangs of New York is, in my opinion, one of Scorsese's best films, and it's so awesome and never gets boring. You can just watch it over and over, and he does some great examples of like metaphorically explaining it all. They're great movies.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of some of the visuals from there. You guys see my welcome sign up there, right? These early 1800s, like that draft riots. That whiskey riot flag, like these flags, like the visuals of that era of Civil War Union propaganda are really, really strong and really like they're jingoistic and exciting. And I think they do a great job of blending those into Gangs of New York. Sorry, completely off subject. But so I wanted to say that the draft riots are important because they lasted only 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What we're looking at right now has lasted 2 weeks. And there were about 1,200 people that died in them.
Right. Hold on. I want to get some dates real quick because the dates are also essential. Okay. So the New York City draft riots lasted from July 11th to July 16th of the year 1863. What had happened the week before is the largest battle ever fought on the North American continent. Gettysburg was the week before. They literally pulled units out of Gettysburg to go to New York to quell these riots.
Wow.
And let's just say the soldiers were a wee bit prickly.
And we saw that with the 1916 uprising too, right? That they brought soldiers in who had just been fighting in World War I to quell the uprising, and the soldiers were not having it. And so the violence was even larger. So 1,200 dead, lasted 5 days. I don't want to get too much into the weeds here because we've got a lot of stuff to cover. But I just think it's important for folks to like understand that 1,200 dead over 5 days, that's closer to a war than what we have going on right now. That lasted 5 days. This has lasted, 2 weeks, 13 days, 14 days. And we are not seeing 1,200 dead. So there's a distinctive difference, right? So then I'm going to jump a little bit ahead here to another important riot, and I think it's this one is difficult to talk about because it's been so long ignored. But the Tulsa race riots, and the Tulsa massacre.
I literally had never heard of this until Watchmen.
Oh,
no! I'm not kidding you. I know that says something. But
and you were an American history major.
Yeah.
But what does that say about our education system? They don't put this in our curriculum. Why?
Never even heard of this. This was amazing to me.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed, but
I
Yeah.
had a black friend explain this to me. A black friend had to sit me down and tell me about Tulsa for the first time. That was maybe a decade ago.
Yeah.
So
So
I'm late to the game too. But
one day,
Watchmen handled it really well.
yeah,
it was over the course of one day. 200 black people died. 50 white people died. 200 people. Look at that street. That is a war. That looks like a war, but we don't classify it as a war. Why? Because it was 200 black people that died, 50 white people. And basically planes were used to bomb the area. That is an aerial bombardment of a US city. And just to give folks an idea, we're not going to get too far into it because I think it warrants its own moment. But I do want to say that the massacre began on Memorial Day weekend. After 19-year-old Dick Rowland, a black shoe shiner, was accused of assaulting Sarah Page, the 17-year-old elevator operator of the nearby Drexel building.
right.
Right? And white people attacked a thriving black community and leveled it. And I think that's super important that we remember, right? Like we talk about wars and unprecedented times. This, no matter how much destruction we see, oh my God, Target, oh my God, this police precinct in Minnesota, oh no, the Bobby Hundred's store, Fairfax, look at what happened in Tulsa. And
There's nothing left.
look at me and tell me that this is unprecedented or this is a war, right? Or that this is the beginning of something that, no, man, like this country is built on these moments.
If you had told me this is a picture of Hiroshima or Nagasaki, I would have believed you.
Right? Or post World War II Germany.
Berlin or whatever. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason I would say it's probably not Hiroshima, and this is just me being a nerd, is that there's still buildings in the background. Just saying.
There's still a little bit left.
God is in the details
look
there.
At this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unbelievable. So that was the Tulsa massacre, and then another thing that another moment that I think is a little bit closer to what we're going through right now is the assassination of MLK. And the MLK, the unrest and riots and protests that happened after the assassination of MLK. Anybody want to guess how many days that lasted?
5?
Right, 5 seems to be the
right
go-to.
Like the human
people,
endurance level seems 5 days, and then you got
exactly. People get tired. They can't
your
keep it up.
Resources drain. Yeah.
Right.
What is it?
52 days.
Shit.
No. Really?
52 days of unrest. That's not protests. That's unrest across cities in the U.S. Now, it's not like the same place saw 52 straight days, but the country saw 52 straight days of unrest.
And I will say, I sent you guys that picture of one of my favorite bars in D.C. When I lived in D.C., I don't know now, buildings probably been torn down and it's beautiful apartments, but there were still buildings when I lived in D.C., and it finally dawned on me. I was like, holy cow, that burned out building is from the 68 riots. It's still there. Like, that's how close we are, right?
Yeah. And then the other, so we're talking, so the MLK murder riots, 52 days. The crowds were predominantly black, which is not the case right now. It is a mixed mass movement right now. Crowds were predominantly black, 43 deaths over the course of the 52 days, and 20,000 people arrested.
20,000.
20,000 people arrested.
So we're talking nationwide.
Nationwide, yes. 20,000 people nationwide. So
so people know, my wife asked, 1968, these riots and uprisings and unrest are far worse than what we're seeing today for people that are scared.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're talking about 52 sustained days,
right?
Like 52 days of consistent and also the anger over the murder of MLK. You can imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you didn't have video back then where police had to restrain themselves.
That part.
Right.
That part right there.
Yep.
we do not even know what really happened because no one had phones with
Right.
cameras.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I'll tell you some of the best. Actually, Ken Burns' baseball documentary touches on this. They have some of the best footage that I've ever seen of the '68 riots, especially for Washington D.C. So if you want to see it, go into the 1960s Ken Burns baseball. It's really interesting.
yeah.
Speaking of haircuts,
Yeah, right. I'm with you.
he's fine. He's doing his thing. Okay. So again, we touch back on this unprecedented vibe. This is not unprecedented.
It is not
It's
unprecedented.
just being recorded for the first time by citizens.
Yeah, and this picture here is super important to that. This is a picture from the Watts riots, the Watts uprising, and I have a personal connection to that. I was part of a group that did like a really interesting hour by hour reenactment on Twitter, live tweeting of the Watts uprising, and for the 50th anniversary.
And that was super cool. That was really cool. I followed
neat.
you guys on that. It was awesome.
So Watts riots lasted 5 days, right?
Yep.
National
August
Guard
11 to 16.
National Guard called in, just like here. 5 days, 34 deaths, all focused in Watts in Los Angeles. This picture that I'm showing here is probably the tamest one. I'm trying to not post pictures of blood and gore to be sensitive to the people that are there. But you can imagine that if the pictures in black and white that photographers with press badges had to go and get up in there and take, if those pictures are gory, you can imagine what wasn't taken and what they didn't have access to.
Right.
And so again, lasted 5 days, had 34 deaths. Cost millions and millions in damage to the community, and you know what kind of systemic change came from it? You know, it was a riot against police brutality, very similar to what's going on right now. Somebody was arrested and not murdered, but beaten, and the crowd just wasn't having it anymore, and it was a riot against the police. And very similar to what we're seeing now. But again, it was primarily black. And so then we come to now, right? And I believe this is actually Chicago, and piss on whoever didn't tell the people up front that BLM was upside down there. But the I know. But these Black Lives Matter protests are unprecedented in an important and different way. And that is that they are multicultural, multiracial, sustained, peaceful protests through the country. The days of looting and rioting, we might be able to say that they were about maybe, if not fewer, 5,
yeah,
3,
yeah,
right? Like it seems like 5 days is the total amount is the amount for total chaos, but but you know, like what they are now, almost 2 weeks later, is very different than what they were when it started, and what these people like the bow and arrow guy was Diabetes Legolas, and. It's big Diabetes Legolas, Diabetes Hawkeye. But like the people who are out there wanting to see that war, it's not materializing for them. Even the people who were inciting things, it's not working out for them. Instead, what we're seeing is mass protests and mass displays against the same kind of overreaction by the police that we saw weeks and weeks. And I took a look in right-wing Twitter this morning, and they are still focused on the police as victims here. But like, how can you like, oh no, the people are throwing, you know, water bottles at the cops, and then you have on the same on the same timeline pictures of people who've been shot in the face by canisters.
Right.
Right. Like it's I think this information age and the difference that like the inability to other the protesters, I think are the two big you don't agree?
Oh, I'm like, yeah, I'm saying no, like to all my white ancestors. I'm going to everybody who tried it and failed. You're right, Alf. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that what's amazing to this moment is that we are seeing ourselves gassed and assaulted by the government, by the police, in the same way that we were easily able to say, oh no, those were just black protesters in the South in that time. Right now we're seeing it in our time, and the people on the street look like us, and
they're younger than us. They're even
younger than us. Yeah,
right.
Which is amazing.
Well, and it's interesting you guys bring that up, and like I said, if we want to do like a 1960s civil rights history show later, we can. But there's a strong argument that what pushed the 1960s civil rights thing was people in Illinois and California and Michigan, parents watching their kids who had gone on the freedom rides getting sprayed down and bitten with dogs and beat up, right? Like, there's something about seeing that, and it doesn't speak highly of, I guess, white America, but as you were saying, people like us are seeing us getting involved and getting attacked.
Yeah.
And
that's,
sometimes it takes that. I'm not saying it's honorable.
Absolutely. So I think so. Let's take that moment, right? And we're talking about a highly charged emotional moment, right? Where we're seeing people very obviously assaulted and attacked, and we're kind of feeling it, and there's sort of a partnership with the folks on the street. And we saw the video of these people like kneeling on this man's neck for 9 minutes until he died. And you see all of these things, and into this comes in more complex pieces that are a little bit easier to get confused about. So I wanted to bring up something that's really weird to me that's come up over the last few years, I think, that bears mentioning, and that's Antifa. So the president went on TV during the days of unrest and said, I'm going to declare Antifa a terrorist organization. And I think for those of us who are familiar with history, and those of us who are familiar with movements, it was I was kind of taken aback, because I'm just like, what? You mean the 3 punk kids in
right.
in their mom's basement that show up and yell at Nazis? That's who you're going to declare?
Yeah.
Terrorist organization.
Well, it's not a thing.
It's not a thing.
It's not like Al Qaeda or something.
But it is.
Thing.
But it is like in right wing imagination, right? In the right wing like sort of echo chamber, it's been made out to be like an organization, and
right.
Basically it's a way of dehumanizing and delegitimizing what is happening here. So let's say people are protesting and angry and doing what has been done throughout history, destroying property in anger over injustice, which is a historic norm for this country.
Right.
And people are legitimizing it, saying, no, that's Antifa, a terrorist organization. It couldn't possibly be black anger. It couldn't possibly be people displaying solidarity. No. This is a terrorist organization. We're going to delegitimize this moment. And what happened is that the moment was not delegitimized. And if you look, this whole idea of pinning it on Antifa is now just like a lunatic right-wing talking point. because that reality did not materialize. Because so this picture that I put up here is it's pretty amazing. This is the it's also so sad. It's the anti-fascist building, the Antifa building in Berlin, in the late 30s in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
You can almost certainly rest assured that everybody who visited or was part of this organization, everybody who fought the fascists prior to the rise of Hitler, was killed.
Right.
Like this is the beginnings of Antifa. Antifa, as you can see, there's a Soviet flag there. It was co-opted by anarchist and communist and socialist movements. But really, modern day Antifa is a loose grouping of people. It's mostly a European-centric thing. Germans are really into Antifa because that's part of their history. And it's really, again, fighting against racists and authoritarians. And so the idea of making this non-entity into an entity in an attempt to delegitimize like the real causes and the real reasons people are taking to the streets, it kind of hasn't worked out. And we'll see just there's things that are actually taking hold, and there's things that aren't. Antifa is still like the idea of Antifa as an evil like organization that is behind all of this.
Right.
It's still like it's still a good narrative point for the right wing. But because it has no real place in reality, and because we still have a free press, it's still easy to debunk a lot of these different things. Right. And so I just wanted to kind of touch base on that. And like, I'm not gonna. You see behind me, a Soviet propaganda poster, which could be easily considered anti-fascist. And it's really pro-worker. It's not necessarily anti-fascist, but I have anti-fascist paraphernalia in the house, and that's because I'm anti-Nazi and anti-authoritarianism and anti-racism. And when you villainize or vilify an organization that is not really a thing, then it makes it easy for you to point out people as being part of that organization. There you go. Speaking of, that's Woody Guthrie. Put it up closer so folks can see. Dan is holding up a picture of Woody Guthrie holding a guitar, and it says, "This machine kills fascists."
He was a nut, Woody Guthrie.
Yeah,
he was invested in the time.
Well, there's a fascinating story about socialism in Oklahoma at the turn of the century. We do not think of Oklahoma, sorry to go off on a tangent, we do not think of Oklahoma today as a very left-wing socialist place.
No, sir.
It was wild back at the turn of the century. There was some interesting things. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no problem. So I just wanted to kind of give like the whole Antifa thing
right.
Fuck you. It's not a thing, and like trying to make it a thing. I got accused of being Antifa by a relative the other day. I mean, by marriage. But it's like, what are you like, what? Like, I'm like, look at me. I own no weapons. I have no experience or desire for violence. You're the gun owner hothead, not me. You know?
Well, and
you've got accessories out
that I feel is dangerous enough. Because
amazing.
Antifa is not it's not like a thing, you know? Like there's no Antifa. It's not run by George Soros or whoever, right? Like it's not a thing. So, but the fact of labeling something a terrorist organization, I think, is a dangerous precedent because, you know, you catch somebody at a protest with a bandana and a black sweatshirt, you label them Antifa, and now you can nail them with terrorism charges.
Yep, exactly.
Right? Which is what if a Democratic president did that to the militia movement.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the militia movement, and I honestly think there are some militias that have come out that are like, that is stupid, because they know that it can be used against them later.
Yeah.
So
All right, so let's move on from that. Disturbing as it is,
Yeah.
that is a trope that is existing in this moment. So here's another amazing trope that I think is just kind of wild. Presidential bunkers. So the protests outside of the White House over the first few days were sufficiently large and got sufficiently rowdy that a guardhouse at the White House was burnt down, and the president was moved into a bunker that is, I want to say, something like 120 stories below ground, something lunatic like that.
No.
Not far enough for
25 stories below ground, maybe? Something.
It doesn't matter. An office building below ground.
An office building below ground. And was the way Brass just drank from that, it's very... So Homeboy was moved to this bunker for a period of time, and I think that's an important moment and an important visual, like psychologically for the U.S. and the movement. The reality is that the Secret Service moving a president to a bunker is an important move for the safeguarding of our country, of our democracy. And it should not be looked on as anything as a sign of weakness. However, this president in particular has made a point about not seeming weak, and he doesn't hide, and he's, and here he was being moved into a bunker. The bunker that you see on the right, like that I have this picture of here, this is a bunker for Kennedy. It's somewhere in Florida. It was height of the Cold War. As you can see, it's pretty stark. Like, we think of bunkers as being kind of like negative places. And I think that the bunker narrative and the reason people have jumped on it is pretty important. And I think that it has to do with authoritarian tendencies. So when we think of hiding in a bunker, we inevitably go to this, right? We go to Hitler's bunker. And this one in particular, this is a screenshot from one of the millions of memes out there about Hitler in his bunker. It says, "You won't be able to play on Xbox Live ever again." But I think that the visual and the connotation of having to hide in a bunker really, really resonates with us as Americans, because that is what tyrants do. Tyrants are afraid of their people. And we have seen it happen again and again. Saddam Hussein, right?
Mm-hmm. He hid in a hole.
He was in a hole.
Right?
Hole.
The spider hole, they called it.
Yep. And we wanted to really definitely dehumanize what he was in. It wasn't a bunker, it was a spider hole. Spiders are horrible and they live in holes, right? So Saddam Hussein hid in a bunker, Hitler hid in a bunker, and also I just wanted to show Gaddafi hid in a bunker. And for me, Gaddafi is kind of one of those moments of like, yikes, because Gaddafi was dragged out of his bunker by a crowd. They did some horrible things to him, and then they killed him.
It was like a fox in a chicken coop.
Yeah,
they got that dude.
They got him, and I think that psychology of a bunker and a leader hiding in a bunker is an important psychological message that got sent by us, and that got sent to us as a country. And I do want to say that, like, if you take it at face value, it in and of itself is not a big deal. If Obama had been moved into a bunker because crazy Tea Partiers were protesting healthcare out in front and burnt down a guardhouse, I would be glad that Obama was taken to a bunker.
Right, but those bunkers. Let's be honest. Those bunkers, around Washington, and there's more than one. They're not for this.
No.
They're for actual war, and the fact that you had to go down into one because the people were too close.
Yeah.
As you're saying, there's a bad image there.
The psychological impact of having the president go into a bunker is cannot be understated. And then there's a reason why this whole like bunker baby, bunker bitch. I think even Joe Biden, like who doesn't really partake in needling or he said something like, Obama and I were in the White House 8 years. I never went down to the bunker. I called Obama and he said I'd never been in the bunker. So the fact that people are pouncing on that should tell you that was an important psychological moment for our country, and that impact is something very much in the same way that, you know, trying to vilify and Antifa and trying to delegitimize these protests, very much in the same way that happens. This bunker moment is also like a psychological moment. Both of those are made and are tailor-made and are running in place in order to sort of affect our thinking. But the difference is one is based on just kind of sort of paranoia and theories and political gaming, whereas the other one, it was verified by White House sources. And I think that also speaks, the White House source who let that out, the people who told people that this had happened, knew what they were doing when Bunker Baby went in there. So I just think that's a super important. And while we're talking about bunkers,
Archie Bunker?
No.
Oh.
I did want to give a shout out to one of America's greatest bunkers, the Greenbrier Resort. Gosh, where is it? I think it's in New Jersey, Connecticut.
No. I thought it was West Virginia.
West Virginia. You're absolutely right.
Virginia. And I think you can tour, like it's a tourist thing now.
Yeah, it is. But it was the bunker made for all of Congress. All of Congress was going to be taken to West Virginia and put in here and put up in these silly little beds that you see, and they had, you know,
right,
things to do. They could play ping pong, right, table tennis, and they were supposed to. It was supposed to be able to carry on government in the case of nuclear attack.
And this was not for unrest. This was for nuclear attacks by the Soviet Union, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, so I think you know, those are two important narratives and important conversations that sort of popped up during this this week. But I also wanted to give us the opportunity to kind of go back and tie all of what's been happening to what we've been talking about over the course of the last 9 episodes, because history doesn't happen in a vacuum, and we can make a distinct bridging between the experience of Vlad Dracula and us right now in our homes, and we can say this is similar to what he experienced when ... And so we're not. Let's not start with Vlad, because I think that's Vlad is kind of like a little bit far off, and I also want to go in chronological order of the stuff that we talked about. But Dan, I think you'll kind of appreciate the image that I found here. But this is Vinegar of the Four Thieves.
No, nice.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Which, if you guys remember from our plague episode, the story goes that 4 thieves were stealing and looting during a plague, and the authorities caught them, and they promised they made them give over their recipe that kept them healthy.
Right.
And it's still sold, right, in a store somewhere.
Yes.
And you said it smelled like gas.
Oh yeah, the Pharmacy of Santa Maria in Florence steals. They call theirs 7 thieves. So there's several of these stories and legends. They call theirs the 7 thieves, and each thief only had one ingredient. Like, you know, they're fun, but
I think what this particular story and this, like, what we learned about the plague is that during a plague, it's every man for himself.
Mm-hmm.
There's no time for organized movements. There's no time for, like, if you're having to think of a plague, you're not putting together a worldwide protest over police racism. And what we know about, like, how folks dealt with the bubonic plague is that really like the collapse of Law and Order was kind of like that was just because so many people were dying and so many people were infected and there was so much fear that the idea that somebody could be coordinating this during a pandemic seems far-fetched, considering how how this country even dealt with figuring out a pandemic,
Right.
So any other thoughts about how does the plague affect this moment that we're in right now? I mean, other than the fact that we're probably going to see a spike and probably going to have to go into quarantine again at some point, hopefully August, September, so that October, November we can go into the election.
Well, how the best I can connect to right now immediately with that question is the plague showed that authority isn't working. The current authorities are not working, right?
Good.
As I read in an article the other day, the current occupant of the White House has authority but has no power, right? So during the plague, those people had authority, the kings, the dukes, the whoever's, but they actually had no power over what was happening to them and what was happening to the people.
That's a good observation.
That's off the top of my head, that's what I think about
we
that.
See our government's response in the face of a pandemic as weak and powerless, and we see that we basically question if they couldn't put that together to protect us, then are they really out there to protect us or just to preserve something else? That's a really interesting thing, Dan. I think that's wise. I think the other possible thought around it is once folks are done with a pandemic, there's a paradigm shift where you look at the world in a different way. And I don't think it's a coincidence that as states started to open up, and I'm sure the people that were like, open up so I can go to Baskin Robbins, I'm sure that those people were not necessarily expecting this to be the result of open up.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah, and
Baskin Robbins does sound good though.
It does sound good.
Okay, my turn. My perception of the plague to humanity is Lovecraftian. Lovecraftian insofar as you never describe the monster. The monster is invisible. The monster is in your head. Whatever you think the monster looks like, that's what the monster is. So I was staying home, hunkered down, sheltering in place, and kind of observing myself, fearing the world outside without having we all know what the coronavirus looks like. We've all seen the microscopic pictures of it, but it didn't scare everybody because I saw a lot of people walking around with no masks, carrying on in Los Angeles. So their monster of corona was being told what to do. Mm-hmm. My monster was, I don't want to catch this respiratory thing and die.
Right.
And then I was also concerned, who's going to tell the homeless people and the disadvantaged and the disenfranchised, I should say, who's going to tell them? Because the rich people know already, and they're already in the Bahamas. They're already sheltering in Ireland.
Mask of the Red Death, though. Right?
Yeah.
It's already here. You can't hide.
So to me, it was a Lovecraftian experience sitting through, and we're not done with it, but sitting through the first month or two of the play of Corona was very Lovecraftian. I didn't know what I was scared of. I just knew it was invisible, and I had to be careful of all things.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice work on the Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Well done.
Count on Brassy to bring in Lovecraft. All right. So that was that episode, and it's still with us. And there's so every time I think of the plague and stuff, I'm always just like, whoa. And it's amazing to me also, looking back, it seems so long ago that we were talking about that. But then comes Vlad. And I it's interesting because I was trying to think how does Vlad really how do we talk about Vlad the Impaler here? How does his experience add up to ours? And I think it's important to remember that Vlad the Impaler was the result of intergenerational trauma due to consistent invasion and oppression by a foreign government, and that his fight for liberation of his homeland was colored by the people that he fought. And so I think it's important to, as we start seeing the birth of these myths that are going to surround this moment, because we just saw the Antifa myth and the bunker myth and all of these different things, right? They all have like a little spark of truth, but we hold on to the ones that really resonate, and we're just like, yeah, this is going to be it. And I feel like Vlad's story, I would say that impalement was probably, not that big a part of his life. I wake up, drink my coffee, go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, walk outside, walk the dog, impale a few thousand Turks, go home, turn on the TV. Right? I don't think that was Vlad's life. But for us, he's Vlad the Impaler. This is what he's known for. This is his thing. And how much of that was colored by these moments in history, we really won't know. But then if he hadn't done the impaling, would we ever know about Vlad? So right. It's right.
Oh,
so,
that's a great question.
Yeah. So it's just, for me, like, the story of Vlad the Impaler is a story of occupation and how violence begets violence. And I think that's the violence begets violence part of it, for me, is the most important part of it, because the Turks feared Vlad's violence because they too had perpetrated violence, and they saw what revenge looked like. And the notion of a revenge myth and a revenge narrative is what white people in this country fear the most. What scares people about riots and protests isn't the loss of a target. It's the fact that Black folks have a real bone to pick with this country, and that somehow they're going to come to your house and demand that you take personal responsibility for it. And that's an argument I've gotten in with people all the time. They're just like, well, if a leader comes to my house, I'm ready. And I'm just like, who wants your wraparound Oakleys and your camo clothes, bro? Like, nobody wants your crappy fucking Coors Light memorabilia. Like, you are like, this isn't about you or your things. Nobody wants your things. And if you have in your head that they're coming for you, there's got to be a reason that you have that problem. And I think that Vlad the Impaler idea of like, oh my gosh, he's impaling everybody. He spends 24 hours a day. All you can impale. I think that was built more by the Turks, who were feeling kind of like, oh crap, maybe we shouldn't have gone into Wallachia. Maybe Transylvania is a little too far. Maybe we should just let those mountain people be those mountain people. And there was a little bit of guilt and a little bit of need to make sure that he was looked on as something savage and subhuman and demonic.
Demonic is key.
Right? And so, like, that's my take on Vlad, like, now, right? Like how does all of this tie in? There's you make these monsters. We make these people, we make folks into monsters because it validates our narrative and it validates our fears.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I can't. Yeah. I got no contact.
It was a reach, but I got there.
No, it's there. Man, shit.
And that also speaks to our very first episode, Dan, and what we talked about is history as therapy. Ivanka Trump put Joseph Campbell's blessed name into her dirty mouth, and she was talking about Joseph Campbell and adversity, and I was just like, shut up. And I looked at some Joseph Campbell stuff, and he said something about the cave the cave that you fear the most contains the treasure that you seek. And in this country, the cave that we fear the most is racism and coming to terms with slavery and the treatment of Black people in this country. That is the thing we fear the most. And we will not be the great country and the great thing that we've always aspired to be until we come to full terms with that.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
Any
Please
other
also note that historians do count Joseph Campbell as anti-Semitic. So he's anti-Semitic.
Really?
Yeah, Joseph Campbell's been accused of anti-Semitism.
That's interesting. I'm going to look that up.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated to hear that.
There are no heroes.
You know, the academics,
All right.
He's from that generation.
He is from that generation. Okay. Well,
right.
All right. So I was going to get a poster. Okay.
Well, but everybody has a reason to look into exactly what the evidence was. They can weigh it in their soul and decide from there. But
yeah,
people have accused him of anti-Semitism.
Sure,
that's interesting.
That is interesting. Okay, so so on that bummer, anything else on Dracula?
No, but I really wish I had remembered this for show and tell. I have an Edward Gorey.
Oh, you have it! The punch.
Oh, wow!
I love it.
It's amazing.
I have it on my Amazon list to purchase.
I bought it at a real bookstore back when bookstores were open.
Oh, what?
This was like 2007. I think I got it. It's beautiful.
I'm gonna get two. One so I can just keep it, and the other one so I can actually make it.
Like a real action figure collector that you are. Yes. one mint and one in box and one to play with. Exactly. Do it. You'll have it's amazing. The detail, the Edward Gorey detail on this is beautiful. You'll have a lot of fun with it. That's all my thing about Vlad.
All right. So let's keep going because we also touched base on like basically our mirror country, which was Australia.
Mm-hmm. The Eve to our Lilith.
Yes. And so we are. So here we are in. So wait, Eve to Lilith. That's from like a TV show right now, right?
No, it's from the.
Eve stayed in the garden. Lilith had to go. America left.
Right.
Australia got stuck in the Commonwealth.
Isn't Lilith the first wife of Adam?
Yes.
When she left?
But she got bumped, and America got bumped. We said we're going over the wall. America.
And she's like the queen of. She's like the queen of witches, kind of.
Well, that's a bit. Yeah.
Is that a stretch?
She's just considered someone who can't have kids.
Ah.
She's the queen of that.
So she needs to be vilified. You're right, Dan. She's the queen of witches. That's
supposedly eats babies, but I think people are getting carried away there.
Yeah.
But we're over the wall.
Countless women, we are well aware, are obviously witches. So Australia, man, I got schooled in my Genesis just now. But yeah, we have basically a lot of the same issues Australia had that we had with our indigenous communities. But I do think that there is, and the issues in Australia that mirror ours have a lot of similarities to how we treated Native Americans and the problems that we have with how this government treats Native American communities. And I think one of the things that we learned about in Australia is the insidiousness of colonialism just keeps popping up again and again, and that it is such a fallback for folks. If it's part of your history, it's also part of your DNA. And because Australia was a colony, they were created with a colonizing mindset, and that wreaks havoc for indigenous people. And I think in this country, we were a colony. We also had that colonizing mindset. And in addition to all of that, a baggage that Australia isn't carrying, but that we do, is we were also a slave state, and slavery was part of our DNA. And in the same way that Australia has not been able to purge all of the things that were done to its Aboriginal cultures during its expansion, we have not been able to do that here, because we have not even started to address the issues that underlie it. And Australia right now is going through very similar upheaval around the treatment of Aboriginal folks, reparations for Aboriginal folks. And if you ever wonder, like, how can we do things, or what's going on, or how can we try to do things, maybe take an eye and look to Australia and see what they're up to, and look at New Zealand and see what they're up to, and try to figure out where did all three of us go wrong, who's repairing what's working for them, and maybe we can all, like, all of these sad children that are colonies, these sad traumatized children that are colonies, us being the big kid with extra baggage of slavery, we can look to see how we exercise those demons.
Well, and we're leaving out one of our sisters, Canada, and how they deal with their First Peoples, because their First Peoples didn't recognize the same border. So a lot of the people that they're working with and having to deal with, sorry, I don't like that term, but I can't think of anything better, are the same peoples that we're having to work with, right? Literally, like the Aborigine and the native New Zealanders there, but the Crow and a lot of the northern tribes are the same peoples that we all have to deal with, and they have a far different view. Not that they're great; they have a lot of problems still with dealing with that.
But you want to know what gives me hope?
What's that?
This.
Sorry.
Just watch what happens.
I can't see anything.
So that was the removal of a statue in
was that at Bristol today?
Bristol.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and that is a statue of a colonial slaver who was known in Bristol. In Bristol, he didn't. There was no, slavery didn't exist necessarily in Bristol. And this guy gave a lot of money to orphanages and did a lot of philanthropy in Bristol, but he also sold human beings into bondage for a living.
Yeah.
And so yeah. And what's funny is that one of the mayor, I think, of Bristol said if people want to remove a statue, they should go through the correct channels. And somebody responded, "Looks like he's in the correct channel now."
Because that's where he's actually at.
Yeah.
Channels is going down to Home Depot and getting some chain and a truck.
and
I mean, he's in the water. They threw him in the water. Yeah, Amanda.
Done.
Great.
Yeah.
They threw him in the river.
Yeah. So I think that kind of gives me hope. Let me show you one more thing that gives me some hope, and this is in Brussels.
Oh yeah, Brussels got it too. Incredible.
And in Brussels, that's on top of a statue of King Leopold.
Yeah.
And I know that you guys remember last week. Yeah. You guys remember Roger Casement, handsome Sir Roger Casement?
Looking at him last week.
Sir Roger Casement has got to be looking down on that moment, going like, I never imagined the day where protesters in Belgium would be asking for the removal of a statue of Leopold. And I think that it's just important for us to remember that we are not responsible for the wrongs that we were born into and that our country committed, but we are responsible for righting those wrongs and addressing those wrongs. Just pretending like they don't exist and going like, well, that was so long ago.
No.
We know, number one, that it wasn't that long ago, right? Ruby Bridges is 65. She's younger. She's 20 years older than most of the folks here, 20 something older than the most of the folks here. She's younger than my parents. You know, I think it's important for folks to know that it wasn't that long ago. And we are only now beginning to truly exercise those ghosts. And Australia going through the same thing, but I wanted to take that opportunity to highlight those two moments and how countries are across the world taking this moment to really reconcile what's happening from a historic point about what role people played in the enslavement of others and in the current treatment of others. So moving on, because I just don't, I feel like Australia, it was too wide a sort of a conversation for us. Like, how are we going to tie the Great Emu War back to this? You know, we could say that the government overreacted and sent in troops to fight something that didn't need fighting, and now people make fun of them, right? Because like, you don't send armed combat troops to fight emus in the same way that you don't send in riot gear soldiers to fight kids in the street that are just asking for justice. No. So there you go. There's another tie-in to Australia.
Nice one. Emu War to unrest in the United States in 2020.
That was a bit of whiplash for me, but yeah. I can't believe them emus won.
Hey,
right?
You know what? They won because they're velociraptors. They're the current velociraptors.
Emus are pretty horrifying. But let me just say this. That government overreach and violence will always lose to the people united, or the emus.
Right.
All right. So I wanted to touch base on something, because we're talking about the narratives that are evolving as we're watching all of this historic moment unfold. And I did want to take a moment to talk about Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And how we talked about those narratives being exploited and exploded, and how seemingly insignificant things like Kim Il-sung mentioning that he beat up a Japanese bully turns into like this gigantic myth around Kim Jong-il, Kim Il-sung going to Hogwarts of revolutionary kids in China, right? Like how we explode these moments is how history will be told in the future, and then it'll take a certain amount of time for us to kind of look back and go like, yeah, that wasn't quite it.
Right.
And so we've got the bunker, and we've got Antifa, and we've got all of these incredible things, right? There was a video making the rounds of a policeman being set on fire in Mexico 3 years ago during the war against the cartels, right?
Right.
Being spread right now as part of
happening yesterday.
Yes, exactly. As an attempt to develop the mythology around folks. Last week I mentioned that there were stories that a 13-year-old child had been shot in the face by Sacramento police. That was not true. That was not true. We don't put, it's not because it's within the realm of possibility. We're just like, oh, this is the mythology that's being built around it. So I wanted to kind of give a little tip of the hat to DPRK and the Kims and their incredible gift of the gab for creating mythology. But also I wanted to give a tip of the hat to the U.S. for our ability to create mythology around our founding fathers.
That's just awkward, right?
That's more awkward than Washington dressed as Zeus at the Capitol.
Yeah, and that is one awkward statue, by the way.
Yikes! My roommate goes, "Why is it so sensual?"
No,
I don't know.
You know that there's a statue where he's bare-chested with a sword.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the Zeus.
Yeah.
So So what just for folks that are listening on Spotify, you can go to the Facebook page and we'll have all of these images for you. But the first image I showed, and I'm gonna go back to that first image because I think it's much more scandalous than the second one. But this image, the first image that I showed is George Washington and Abraham Lincoln in heaven. George Washington holding a laurel wreath over Abraham Lincoln's head as they embraced lovingly, I think is the only way to put it.
Just tender.
I'm sorry. That is
Tender.
one sexual embrace right there.
It is.
All I see is $6.
That is one awkward picture.
Yeah.
I feel like I can't even look at it.
Yeah, it's so, and angels are looking on them, right? Like angels are welcoming them both to heaven. It's basically Washington bringing Lincoln up. It's a crazy, bizarre picture. But again, it's these pictures and these images. If you look at the art that's being created right now around some of the folks that have been killed by police.
Mm-hmm.
There is a martyred aesthetic that is very obvious around those images. In the same way that the masked police, the faceless government thug, is also like a visual narrative. And we think about like how the DPRK has sort of moved their visuals around, and we always look at these and we're just like, what on earth, where did they come up with those? And I think it's important for us to look at our own visuals and take credit where it's due, especially when there's pictures of our founding fathers and as Greek deities, just sort of looking down from heaven onto folks. And just to describe the apotheosis, go ahead, Dan. Sorry,
I just have to step in. I have to think, to get through the day, that if Lincoln and Washington saw, I mean, the apotheosis of Washington is amazing piece of art, but I have to think if those two men saw these, they'd be like, what in the hell are you people doing?
He'd spit his wooden teeth out, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I just can't imagine them, either one of those two men being, this is okay. But that's how I get through the day.
Yeah, it's definitely a wild one, and it's funny it's so interesting for me to just kind of sit back and think of what the visual language will be. And I think of import though is that we don't necessarily need mythologies to create visual cues that will resonate for the rest.
Oh, her.
Right,
Yeah,
and this is
her.
actually from a few years back, from another protest of the murder of a black person, the black man by a militarized police. And I think these images will be iconic, and there's no need for us to some of them. There's just no need for us to create this mythology around it, because the mythology is creating itself in real time on camera,
right?
On video. So
really
yeah.
Good.
So that's kind of like how I saw the DPRK.
Right.
And
makes me think of the picture of the woman putting flowers in the barrels from the 70s.
The Kent State. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, and I read a story somewhere. It's not verified.
Well, how about the famous Kent State? Sorry to step in.
No,
of the woman with the guy that had been shot.
Yeah.
The real famous picture. Right.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
So there's somebody said today on Twitter that a woman tried to put flowers in the guns of cops, or tried to give flowers to cops today, and they handcuffed her and arrested her. So, but think about that. Like there's no verification of that, but that is somebody manipulating visuals that we're all familiar with.
Right.
And that make us react immediately. And I just think it's always just interesting to see how powerful that is. And you imagine having that consistently reinforced by a government that controls every aspect of life, like they do in the DPRK. And you can imagine why that society functions completely differently than ours. So I just thought it was a really important takeaway, and just kind of seeing real time how these visual cues develop it's thrilling, to be honest. It's really thrilling. So that's one thing. And then I wanted to touch base on, man, handsome Mr. Roger Casement.
Look at it one more time.
One more time, right? Look at that picture.
Yeah. Look at
handsome
that.
Roger Casement, but also but also the fact that you do not have to topple the government to make something a reality. You do not have to win everything right there and then to make sure that the world that you inhabit has changed. And I think, if anything, from our 1916 episode, something that just that resonates, and that gives me hope. This picture, I chose this picture because I don't think that the people who died in the 1916 uprising could have ever imagined the Ireland that exists today. And it is, it's kind of homogenous here, but it is a multicultural society. They try like a Dickens to be accepting. They're going through some incredible reforms. Their prime minister is a gay man. And here you see just children, differently abled children who are holding balloons and celebrating their country. They won. The 1916 uprising ultimately was successful.
I would have loved to have told Casement, by the way, their prime minister is also gay.
Yeah, right.
I would have loved to have told him that.
Yeah, because for him it was I would say it was the cherry on top of his trial that they outed him, and that his stuff was read in public, because he's a very detailed journal. As I think, Dan, you pointed that out last time.
Well, lucky him.
Well,
could you imagine?
So I think what we are seeing right now, and man, we ended the 1916 one with the commemorations 100 years later, and sometimes it takes 100 years to reach what should have happened immediately after the fight. And I think the Ireland that they fought for in 1916 isn't completely there, but it's closer than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Right. No, they still have fights.
They do. They do. There's still fights to be fought, but if we look at the pictures of 1916 and we look at the pictures of Ireland today, and we look at speaking of Roger Casement, I also, while I was trying to find pictures of handsome Roger online, I also found a picture of Eamon de Valera, the dictator that then the hyper-Catholic president for a long time of Ireland, bringing back the remains of Roger Casement from the UK and giving them a state burial in Ireland. So history, so justice. Just the long arm of, what is it? The arc of justice, the bend of the arc of justice bends long. Yeah. The arc of time or history bends
towards justice.
Bends towards justice, and yeah. I think that ultimately that loop will inevitably reach that moment, and we may see these moments where we feel like it's never going to get there, but we shall overcome. And I think that this moment in history has already changed this country.
Mm-hmm.
We are not going to go back to a place where we ever look at the police the same way, ever look at the government the same way. Like a lot of these things that have been held up.
We'll never look at each other the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
It feels like things have shifted.
They do feel like that. And I wanted to take a moment to show this piece of art that was created today by Nicholas something, the artist. I'm so sorry. I'll put it on the Facebook page and you guys can see it. It was kind of a last minute addition, but I wanted to show the visual language that's created. I'm getting a little bit choked up. But it is a picture of a Confederate statue that has fallen, and black children taking selfies. I believe the name of I believe the name of the piece is called "The Greatest TikTok" or "The World's Greatest TikTok," and it's literally two black children dancing on the remains of a toppled Confederate statue. And as we see these statues come down from across the world, from Bristol to Brussels to Birmingham to the capital of the Confederacy, Richmond, we know right now, 2 weeks in, that the world has changed, that something has shifted, and that is undeniable. And I think that our last episode about law enforcement was about that. And we saw how these institutions were carrying the baggage and the burden. And don't make the mistake to think that in this, that I do not have compassion for the humans who are walking around with the crap life burden of having to enforce the crimes of this country. The men and women of law enforcement, just like all of our citizens, deserve that we ask them to do good for each other. And by perpetuating these racist institutions, we appeal to their worst instincts and to our worst instincts. And we need to remember that these institutions were not formed to protect and serve. They were formed to protect and serve. They weren't formed to protect, serve, and people. Exactly. Profits, slavery, the system.
Right.
So anyway, I just kind of wanted to give folks a chance to kind of unburden yourselves from the previous week's piece about law enforcement. I know I've seen a lot of people talk about the history of law enforcement this week, and I tried to inject the conversation in there.
It's in the zeitgeist now.
It is in the zeitgeist. It is in the zeitgeist, and we were there first. I just want to say, right? But like, any thoughts on like what we've seen this week and what we learned the last week, and kind of how all of this is coming together? Like, Dan, like, do you like? I know that I feel like Chicago has a love affair with cops.
Roommates off to protest.
I don't know if we have a real love affair. It's contentious. You know what I mean? What I saw, I don't know. What I saw this, there was some rough stuff that happened last weekend that I told you guys about later that I saw, right? Like I sent you John Cusack getting roughed up a little bit, right?
What?
Oh,
yes, I sent that to you guys.
I do. I'm sorry that
everybody will
I've
be
never
able
heard.
to see that on our Facebook
What's
page
he
as well.
doing out there?
Well, he was just sort of filming things that were going on, and then the cops just came up on him hard. But from what I personally experienced this week at a couple things, the cops were pretty cool. So, I don't know. I mean, like I told Sarah, like there was one day I was sort of watching and following a march. I kind of, I felt bad for the cops. They weren't in riot gear, but they had their vests and their helmets on, and it was hot, and you could tell they were just, ugh. But they were being really cool with people and being nice. So
I feel like that's kind of performative at this point, considering how they behaved just earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what?
Bullets directly to the fucking head, or excuse me, I shouldn't be cussing, but
yeah.
Rubber bullets to the head and body. I don't care if you teach kids the Macarena. I don't care if it's 90 degrees humidity. You're shooting rubber bullets at people directly.
Yeah. And you're doing it to her. And our mayor's Lori Lightfoot, she's
amazing. I mean,
she's real tough.
Yeah.
Do not play with her, as she has literally said. She's broken up parties during the lockdown.
I remember that. So if you want to say that the artist that made the image, his name is Nicholas, Nikkolas, and you can see his stuff is nicholas.com. And I would say he's one of the most significant artists of this moment in time. He works quickly, and I've actually I've worked with him on a couple of projects, and it's just pretty incredible. But this image today really got me. So I just wanted to point that out. And Brass, I wanted to talk to you about like what's going on with how people view the police in Los Angeles. So my brother used to go to Coffee with Cops to talk to cops about like what's going on.
And I adore him for that, because there needs to be outreach. There needs.
But he doesn't do that anymore.
Well, I'm sure he's done with it, but
yeah,
I applaud him for doing that. But now it probably doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel right. And I think that's I think that's what happened over this weekend. I think that's the one of the biggest takeaways is that what was okay in our interactions with police, this idea of the friendly neighborhood policeman, right? Like coming in and top of the morning to you, Dano. How are you doing today? Oh, it's good to see you. Oh, won't be getting in trouble there, Brassy, right? Like all of those, like, and sorry to all the Irish people that might have been offended, but
sorry, everybody.
But
we watch a lot of Father Ted.
We did watch a lot of Father Ted. but that mythology of the kindly police officer has given way to, I think, a harsher reality where we see it as an enforcement, like a group of people that are enforcing the status quo and the repression and singling out of people. And I just wanted to ask you, like, how that feels in LA, because in LA, it's always been a contentious. We could do a whole episode on LAPD.
We could, if we want to, but
yeah,
let them look at the news. That's our episode right there.
Yeah, like, do you feel like there was like that the breakdown with police in LA has been huge, or like what do you think?
I preface this by saying I've not been out on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I'm really quite ashamed to say I've not been out on the streets.
Yeah.
Because I'm still living in COVID world.
Yeah. My wife and I are going out today, and it's the first time. And the thing is, it's crazy for someone like me. I've been marching.
That's you.
I go to small marches, right? Like I show up to where there's only 12 people. So the fact that there's these mass nationwide marches going on and I'm not there is hurtful. But I hear you.
So we understand this.
Yeah, I'm in COVID land too.
All my great friends that are down there with their Nikons and their cameras and their cell phones, and they're catching everything, are catching some really amazing sentimental moments of, you can see Black and people of color on the police force looking really distraught under their helmet. They don't seem comfortable. Black cops and the military, the National Guard that rolled in here a few days ago.
Yeah.
The people of color serving on these things look extremely uncomfortable. And I don't think I have to add anything to that. Again, I don't have any leg to stand on because I'm not down there looking at anybody. I'm looking at social media and allowing that to drive my narrative. So maybe I should censor myself here. But what I've seen from real ass photographers, not just my roommate, but like real photographers are going down there and catching these moments. The brutality is astonishing.
Yeah.
The brutality is astonishing. And I think a lot of it is everyone's afraid. Everyone's afraid of each other. I'm scared to death of being John Cusacked in the street.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm scared to death. and you know what? These cops are scared to death of us.
Right.
For different reasons. That fear is just, I don't know.
And do you feel? Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Just to step in, I mean, downtown Chicago, the Loop got real rough like last weekend, right? And that's where a lot of the images come from. It also says a lot about the city of Chicago that the things I saw last week, which were completely peaceful, and like I said, the cops were fine. speaks a lot about. I mean, Chicago's the most segregated city in the United States. So,
You also happen to be the
you know,
birthplace of one
the
of the
fact
greatest
that
first families.
right. So, I mean, you know, I live on the north side, and things are perfectly pleasant on the north side.
Yeah. So I did want to. I wanted to take. We're kind of nearing the end here, and I wanted to take a moment to talk about policing and law enforcement in the U.S. and where we go next, and sort of rethinking the idea of like, what is the police actually keeping us safe, or are they escalating situations? And the police have been asked, like, whenever anything goes wrong, we're pointing to the police, organizations that were not built to deal with mental health issues, with issues of finance, with issues of poverty, with issues of like all sorts of different issues, right? They are built to arrest, to escalate, and to be the enforcement, right? Law enforcement, and so
Right.
we're basically approaching everything with a fist. And I think that we need to, and it's easy and it's exciting for us to think of like, right is right and wrong is wrong, right? But what we've learned and what we keep running into is that the world is a complicated place. It requires complicated answers, and the police force is an uncomplicated answer to a question that we're not even asking anymore.
Oh my Lord!
Right. Yes, and you're right. Like, so the cops are being asked to do things, and sorry, I'm going to go way out of my element here. So if you want to light me up later, that's fine. The cops are being asked to do things that cops traditionally don't do. But I think we can wrap it into when you were talking about that, I was like, teachers and the education system is also being asked to do things that they were not supposed to do, right? Like we're asking these institutions to do things that they weren't originally to do, and we really haven't equipped them as a society to do the new things we want them to do.
But they're figuring it out on their own.
But the point is, so Dan, yes, but the police and the police are not underfunded like teachers are.
Okay, right, yes. Good point.
And
You're right.
Police, like I'm sorry, for the amount of money we're spending, we should be able to ask them to be shrinks and be and be, you know, and educate folks and de-escalate and all of these things.
Right.
But they're not doing that. They're simply, because they were built to brutalize, because they're a simple answer to a complex question. They're not doing that. They're just doubling down and tripling down and militarizing on that simple answer to a complicated question. And ultimately, they are there to put things down, to protect property, and to keep people in their place. And that's what they're doing at a gigantic scale now. And I want to kind of like, and that's why I think it's important for us to reimagine what keeps us safe, to think about, like, is incarceration, how we do it in this country, really something that keeps us safe? Is how the police interact with people making us safer? Like, does somebody having and Brass, you and I both live downtown LA, is having a person obviously having a psychotic breakdown due to mental health issues or drug issues in the middle of the street, naked, wielding a machete?
Yes.
Like,
this is real, Dan, by the way. This was real.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Is that moment a moment that should be approached with only guns, or with mental health professionals guiding the moment? Why are the police responding to that, and how are we expecting them to respond?
It embarrasses them.
And
it embarrasses them to touch people like that. It embarrasses them to deal with people who have are going through psychotic breaks or are naked in the street, literally.
Yeah,
and being barefoot is gross enough down there.
They should not have to, because they are not equipped to. So let's stop asking them to, and let's stop funding them like they need to.
Right.
Right. Well, and I guess here's the. In a lot of ways, I don't think it's fair to those individual law enforcement people that aren't equipped to go deal with that, right?
Right.
like as that individual person. So here's what I'm getting at. Our whole system of law enforcement for the 21st century and even back through the 20th century is not
Scrap it.
we need a we need a new paradigm.
Scrap it.
I will say, like the cops are not going to be defunded. Like law enforcement's not going away. No one's going to get on board with that. But
I might.
well, I mean, you might. I'm saying like a lot of the people in power might.
Yeah.
Might.
People in power.
What I'm saying is the government is not going to do that. I'm sorry. It's like getting a metro stop in Georgetown. It's not going to happen. But the paradigm can change. The system of thought can change. The way we approach it can change.
I mean, so I'm just gonna say, Dan, that at moments similar to this, somebody on a YouTube podcast said the Tsar will never be taken down and stepped away from power. The people in power won't allow the Tsar to be removed.
Okay.
But we can change the paradigm. And
right.
I'm saying that we might be at a moment right now where there's enough instability that could potentially pivot some change that is bigger than what we are imagining at the moment from our comfortable, safe spaces at home. So
okay.
I agree, Dan, that it's unlikely, especially considering the amount of power that is concentrated in very small people and how that's been exploited in the past, and how there's still a lot of folks who are beholden to that power because the little comforts that they have in their life is enough to make them feel like it's worth supporting.
Right.
But we also have to allow for the opportunity and the possibility that this may become bigger than what we think. And just 2 weeks ago, nobody was talking about funding the police and defunding the police. And this morning, NPR, which NPR is the nerdy art school, like art teacher of the media world. It's the flowing dress, a lot of trinkets art teacher of the media world, and NPR posted something this morning that said, "Do we actually need the police?"
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. What I'm saying. Sorry.
No. It's not an argument.
No. And I don't mean that could all change. What I'm saying is the laws of the kingdom will be enforced somehow, some way.
Sure.
That's what I'm trying to get at. That's what I mean by law enforcement is not going away. It might change. But like,
that's all we're
not going to
asking.
turn into anarchy.
We're only asking for change.
Yeah. So okay.
Right. No. And I agree 100%.
So
I guess my thing is, what is law enforcement from here? Right. I don't know what it is, because all I know is police.
I'm gonna finish this with we're gonna finish this with one final thing. I've got a good clip here, and so this image is part of an art installation that I was a part of 2016. I was part of this group that put this together, and it says, since 1980, California built 22 prisons but 1 university. And I think if anything has really resulted from this moment is that our priorities in this country and how we spend money are not helping people. They're only helping either corporations or folks that or helping keep people down. And if any of you have seen the movie 13 by Ava DuVernay on Netflix, or if you guys are familiar with the work of Ryan Stevenson, I think, and a lot of these basically modern day abolitionists. In fact, look up Susan Burton if you're interested in modern day abolition. But her organization is called A New Way of Life, and it helps women who were formerly incarcerated. But we need to think about law enforcement and how we jail people and how we treat folks in this country and where our priorities are. We are funding schools and not prisons. We are funding cops and not counselors. And at some point, those chickens come home to roost. And I believe that this is that moment where those chickens are coming home to roost.
And there's a fox in the hen house.
Yeah, and yes, yeah, and so I think just as a kind of like a sign off stat, I wanted to kind of give folks an idea of just how big law enforcement is in this country and what we are doing to people. The U.S. makes up 5% of the world's population. Just 5% of the total global population. But we have 25%, a quarter of the world's total prison population. And that didn't happen overnight. That happened since 1970. So it's not like we've always had a huge prison population. We have been becoming a law enforcement state and a police state for a long time now. And suddenly we look up and we see police beating people up and running down the streets in tanks, and we're surprised. But funding for police has gone up by hundreds of percentages, and our incarcerated population since 1970 has gone up 700%.
Right.
Disgusting.
It's interesting, and we can't get into it too deep now. I think this is great for our 1960s, 1968 episode at some point, because it is tied into that to a degree. But that's it's not a great statistic.
It's not a great statistic, and I think
because either you have like crazy law enforcement that's out of control, or you live in a completely out of control anarchic world. Right? Like,
or you live in the Netherlands.
Two options are not good, and we know that we don't live in that.
There's another option out there, and it's community policing. It's called restorative justice. I suggest everybody look that up and familiarize yourselves with restorative justice. It's somebody steals something from me, they get caught, they get brought back to in front of me, and I get to decide how they can make it up to me for stealing my thing.
Right.
We don't put them in jail, and we make them work to make my life because they stole my thing. Right? Somebody came in and stole my TV. The police catch them, and they're like, "Okay, here they are. How do you want to handle this?" And I say, "I want my TV back." And they're like, "Well, I can't afford a $500 TV." And then I'm like, "Well." And I can say something like, "Okay, well, mow my damn lawn for the rest of your life," right? And there will be a moment where they show up to mow your lawn after like 2 years, where you're just like, "Hey," right? Like the person who stole my TV isn't some creature that stole my TV. It's a human that deserves a chance at redemption, not to be thrown into a prison, thrown away, and part of a system that perpetuates that stuff. I think it was a poor way of explaining what restorative justice is. It's a lot more complicated than that, but there are alternatives, and there's people who have been thinking about this for a long time, and the time has come.
And I wanted to clarify what I meant was you don't have two options of law enforcement or anarchy. What I'm saying is it doesn't look good if you have this giant prison population. That's what I meant. Like, either you have an out of control law enforcement situation, which is what we have, or you live in an anarchic society, which we know that we don't live in.
Right.
That's what I was trying to get at. Sorry.
No, it's okay. And I think there's also like a lot of thinking that folks need to do around like, what does anarchy mean? What does all of these different, like, what are these different pieces? I'm not by any means, just so everybody knows, I'm not an anarchist. But that
would be a fun episode, anarchic philosophy.
Anarchist. Yeah. Boy. So I want to thing with the full video. Because I do think that there's there's amazing art and amazing things being created, and I think that this is such a moment in the zeitgeist, and it highlights Black joy, and it highlights the ability of people to poke fun and find levity and happiness in a moment that is dark. And few populations know how to do that better than the Black community here in the U.S. So I'm going to actually take us off of video. We can still do audio, but wave at everybody. Brass, it's amazing seeing you.
I'm a real person.
You are a real.
Do we want to do show and tell?
Oh, do we want? Yes. Sorry, I almost forgot show and tell.
Did I put you on the spot?
No. What do you got? What do you got, Dan?
Well, so one thing I wanted to point out. Sorry, I did have something this week. I thought it was fun. All right. So one thing I do want to point out, we've had a very awesome conversation, but we did yesterday celebrate the 76th anniversary of the D-Day landings.
Oh, yeah.
That was yesterday.
That's right.
Which is, talk about a big situation.
Speaking
But I
about
wanted to share
fascism.
something from my wife. So can everybody see this? I can't see myself, so I can't really tell. Do you see this young man?
Oh, look at that.
That is my wife's grandfather,
Uh-huh.
Charles Dobbins. And we'll talk about him later if we do like a World War II episode. He was a pilot on B-17s.
Oh, shit.
But I want to read this to you. On April 18th, 1944, while on a training mission in Florida shortly after takeoff in a B-17 Flying Fortress, the outboard engine showed signs of failure. Dobby, that was his nickname, assumed command of the aircraft and safely crash-landed in an alligator and snake-infested swamp. All 10 crew members survived, with Dobby going on to fly the next day. Truly a Sully hero of the time, and an incident we might call the miracle of the swamp. You have to love small-town newspapers.
Right.
Over 6 years later, in 2010, an Avon Park Air Force Range archaeologist discovered the remains of the famed aircraft and are designating the area as an official historic site.
Yeah. That's
It's kind of a fun little family thing there. That's awesome.
That is incredible.
So,
It's
isn't it?
hard to top.
What do you have?
Well, can we count my Richard Gorey?
Yeah,
Okay.
done.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Let's
That
count
was
my
a good
Richard
one. That was a
Gorey
good one.
Dracula paper doll house.
So Dan, just going off of what you just said, I wanted to actually show this. Oh, hang on. Sorry, gotta. I wanted to show this. James Doohan, Scotty of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Me of Juno at Juno Beach, and he took
Oh, wow.
out a sniper's nest. He was shot 6 times. He said he gave Hitler the finger. Anyway, that's Jim Doohan of Star Trek.
Amazing.
Good one.
Bless him.
There was I think I want to say the Canadian government actually commemorated Scotty recently for his service in World War II. So I have a couple of things. I'm not sure if you guys noticed how my back wall has increased.
It changes a little bit every week, Alf. I've
So
noticed.
the thing with the eye in the fringe, that's what I've been watching the whole episode.
That's the it's not omniscient eye. What do they call that? The all-seeing eye.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the dollar bill, right?
Yeah, I mean,
it's very secret society of you.
it is very secret.
Is that a Mason's?
Yeah, no, it's nothing. It's a tattoo shop in Colorado Springs that makes random ass banners, but it looks so badass that
It is awesome.
like I love having it in the background. Like when I do Zoom calls for work, they basically get to see like Soviet propaganda, the all-seeing eye, my protest little thing here from Earth Day protests in New York, and then this beauty right here. You can't really make it out.
You don't want to take it off the wall? Maybe? No, can you?
Take it off the wall.
You're about to move anyway.
That's right. So
is that Sherman?
It is Sherman. It's William Tecumseh Sherman, known for being as unfeeling about the feelings of uncaring of. There you are.
This I'll explain later.
Yeah, but basically, William Sherman, a little bit of a hero because he was a true abolitionist. Really knew what it was to bring war to people who. When people, we talked early on this episode about people saying it's a war. Roger Sherman knew what war was. War was hell, and he brought it.
So that we can get into, like, he knew that this is not going to end by Christmas. This is going to be complete and utter devastation of people, and that's the only way it's going to work.
There you go.
And we'll talk about it later, and then I'll talk about that.
Awesome. Okay, now let's do what we were going to do. So, like I said, an absolute expression of joy in a difficult time, in a difficult moment. By I think from a global perspective, the Black population of the United States, the art, the music, and their existence is a miracle of happiness and beauty and joy in a state and system that has been doing nothing but attempting to silence them and oppress them. And this is Remix God Suede is who made this video.
The final line, is it worth it for you? Is it worth it for you?
And so we're just gonna go off. We'll watch this as a crew. Feel free to react because there's plenty to react about.
You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. Get this thing. You about to lose your job because you are detaining me for nothing. You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. Get this thing. You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. Get this thing. You about to lose your job because you are detaining me for nothing. You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job because you are detaining me for nothing. You about to lose your job. Get this thing. You about to lose your job. Get this thing. You about to lose your job. Get this thing. You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. Get this thing. You about to lose your job. Get this thing. You about to lose your job. Is this shit worth you losing your job? Cause you bought to. Cause you ain't got no reason.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.